What is going on, everyone? I am pretty surprised that I've been keeping this trend going of pretty much doing these late 2018 reviews, and I know I already did like a still worth it of this year for 2018, but a lot of things have changed since that video. We've seen a brand new OS version, we've seen brand new iPhones become released. Why did I say that so weird? And we've seen a lot of other new things changed by Apple, and even a new budget iPhone that it's kind of cool to look back and see their last budget iPhone that they made, which was the iPhone SE technically speaking. And it's kind of sad that they stopped making these. They actually discontinued these, so you can't go to the Apple store and pick them up anymore, but you can still pick them up from third-party websites. I think Walmart still sells them out of all the companies, but I think Best Buy does too. But before even making a decision like that, should you still buy the iPhone SE? Let's go take a look. Looking around the body, it's pretty much the same body as the iPhone 5S. I think we all know that by now, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think the iPhone 5 was the best designed iPhone, and then the 5S followed. That's pretty much the same thing. And if you like a smaller size, the iPhone SE will definitely speak out to you. I don't think it feels cheap at all. You have the back and the glass on the top and the bottom, which is a super nice touch. And you also have like the rose gold color, which you guys might like. If it was me, I would love to have like a rose gold with a black front, but I don't know if I'm able to do that. But you do have different color options, so that's super cool. You do have Touch ID as well on the front. The only downside is it's only Touch ID 1, but it's still not that bad. I mean, I'd rather have Touch ID over Face ID if I'm being completely honest, but it's whatever. And you also have a headphone jack on the bottom, so at least they looked out for that. So technically speaking, the iPhone SE has some things that even the iPhone XS doesn't have. So that's definitely cool. But this phone came out in 2016, so it's kind of weird. It came out in March. And the reason that's weird is because it came after the iPhone 6S, but it came before the iPhone 7. And I'll explain a little bit more why that is weird, but just keep that date in mind. Now, like I said, the front has a 4-inch screen. It's 640 by 1136. It has 326 pixels per inch, and it's not completely low. Like, it's not the worst screen ever. And because it's small, it kind of does a good job at kind of making it look like it's a better panel than it is. But it's not that bad. And if you're paying this much for a phone, I mean, you can get one for like around $100. I don't think you're going to complain too much about the screen. Now, in terms of the OS versions, and this is why I said it was weird, this phone came out after the iPhone 6S, so it ended up starting off getting iOS 9.3.2, and so it didn't start off getting iOS 9 or iOS 10, it just started off at the end of almost the last version of iOS 9. So the reason that's weird is because I don't know if this is going to stop when the iPhone 6S stops or when the iPhone 7 stops. For me, I would probably assume it's with the iPhone 6S just because it has almost the same exact specs, but I could potentially see Apple expanding it a little bit longer to match the iPhone 7 because this is the last smaller version of iPhone they're going to make, so I think they might want to extend it out a little bit, but it's really up in the air at this point. But in terms of right now, it does have iOS 12, and then throughout my whole entire testing process of everything, I found that iOS 12 is very, very good, okay? It's very good. It's much better than iOS 11. I think it's like on par with iOS 10. It's very stable. I don't really have too many problems with it besides all those like small little bugs that everyone's going to have, like random like keyboard glitches and stuff like that, but it's really not that bad, especially compared to iOS 11. And in terms of performance, now I'm going to say these specs and then I'm going to talk about my specific performance. It has the Apple A9 chip. It has a dual-core CPU clocked at 1.84 gigahertz and 2 gigabytes of RAM. Now with those specs, you might think, oh my god, it's so low, it's this and that. But I personally think that this phone is a very, very good performing phone. And it's weird because, like I said, it has almost the same exact specs as the iPhone 6S. But the weird thing is that I think this phone might be faster than the iPhone 6S. And the reason I say that is because when I put iOS 12 on it, I always found that it was like way more like fluid and snappier than on the iPhone 6S. And it could be because of the size of the screen. Because the screen is a little bit smaller, it doesn't have as many pixels to push. But I don't think it would make that big of a difference. And I did a speed comparison between the iPhone SE and the iPhone 6S on iOS 12. And I found that the iPhone SE is still like, I think it opened up more apps faster, if that makes any sense. And I did the iPhone SE versus the iPhone 7 as well, and I think the iPhone 7 beat it for the most part, but not by much. And maybe the iPhone SE won here and there, but I still think that the iPhone SE is very, very good in terms of performance. And that's why it kind of leads me back to the other question of I don't know if it's going to stop when the iPhone 6S stops or the iPhone 7 stops. But whether you're multitasking or whatever you're doing, one thing I found is that the 2 gigabytes of RAM really helped this phone out. Thank God it didn't get 1 gigabyte of RAM, but I feel like it is going to get bogged down by the time iOS 13 comes out, just because there's phones now, especially iPhones, with 4 gigabytes of RAM, and maybe the new iPhones or other iPhones that they're going to release in 2019 are going to have 5, so this phone is definitely going to feel a little bit aged. But if you're storing apps in the background and everything, you're going to have no problem accessing them. That's really it in terms of the raw, like, opening apps, closing apps, the camera, this and that. In terms of gaming, I found gaming to be very good as well. Again, I think I found that a little bit more faster on the iPhone SE than the 6S, so that's definitely a good sign. Whether you're doing Real Racing 3 or Nova, whatever the game is, I always found it fast on the iPhone SE. I really don't have too many complaints about it. So in terms of performance, you're going to be perfectly fine. Don't even worry about it. You should go worry about something else like global warming or the economy or something. The iPhone SE's performance is not something that you should be worrying about just because it's so good. Now, kind of switching and going along, the camera is one of the better aspects of this phone as well. It's a 12 megapixel camera. It's a single sensor. Unfortunately, it does not have OIS, which is optical image stabilization. So if you're taking videos, they might look a little bit shaky, but it's not too bad. I think you're not going to expect, DSLR quality photos out of this thing. You also don't get portrait mode or portrait lighting or smart HDR like the newer iPhones have. But again, I mean, if you're getting this phone, I don't think you're going to expect a lot out of it. And those are really my only gripes. I still think this is a very good sensor. Apparently, they said it's the same thing as the 6S camera, and I could probably attest to that. It probably is. I'm not like a complete photographer or anything, so I don't know, so I'm going to take their word, but it's a very good camera. I don't have any problems with it. You can shoot 4K at 30 frames per second, and you can shoot 1080p at up to 120 frames per second, so if that speaks out to you, that's super awesome. And photos and everything look good. Really, the only downside with the whole camera sensor is, besides those portrait mode and whatever software things, the front camera is only 1.2 megapixels, which does kind of suck because the iPhone 6S had a 5 megapixel camera on the front, and I feel like the iPhone SE could have handled it as well. But again, it's not that big of a deal. I doubt you're going to take selfies either, dude. And honestly, with 1.2 megapixels, I think it'll work fine for you because I know you're super beautiful. Even if it was a 0 megapixel camera, I think you could still make that photo look good. So, and it also only shoots 720p at 30 frames per second. So no 1080p on the front camera, but again, not that big of a deal for you. You're a beautiful person. You can handle it. And that's the whole entire camera aspect of this phone. And continuing on, I made a whole separate video talking about this specific topic, and it's actually the battery on the iPhone SE. And I found that when I compared it to my iPhone 6S, my iPhone 7, and my iPhone 6, I found that the iPhone SE on iOS 12 had better standby time than all the other iPhones, which was super crazy because I was expecting the iPhone SE to do the worst because it's the smallest and doesn't look as good. But it actually ended up having better battery life in terms of standby. Now, in terms of the screen being open, I think it was a close second. I think the iPhone 6 beat it, which was super weird again, but it makes sense because it's underpowered. But the iPhone SE had very, very good battery life on iOS 12. So if you're getting one, I would consider updating to iOS 12. So if you're scared of the battery life not being good or anything like that, I'll say again, this is not one of those phones that you should worry about. You might still have to charge by the end of the day. If you think about it, the iPhone 6, 6S, and 7, they didn't necessarily have the best battery life. The iPhone 7 actually kind of did have pretty good battery life, but the iPhone SE, I'm telling you right now, it'll probably get you through a day. If you plan on using your phone a lot, just bring a charger. But I think it's probably a 75 to 80% on the battery scale, I would say, just because it is a smaller phone. It doesn't have that big of a screen or high resolution screen to power. And, it's not the most intensive performing game phone ever. So for those reasons, I think the iPhone SE does a very good job with the battery that it has. Now, some other notable things to note, like I said, this phone does have Touch ID. The size is kind of a make or break for you because for me, I could probably use an iPhone SE, but that's one of the distinguishing factors whether you get a phone like this or you kind of go up to an iPhone 6S. I personally think that this size speaks to a lot of people, and Apple should have never taken the size away just because they made these huge iPhones, and now the iPhone SE is the smallest one. So I'm not saying the size is a con or a pro. I'm just saying if this is a size you like, then this is a very good option. There's really not a lot of phones out there that are still supported with their OS that is actually this size. But me personally, I'm not a huge fan. I like a bigger phone. I think the 10 is probably the smallest I would go, or the 10S is the smallest I would go. But the iPhone SE is not a horrible size if you like that kind of design. But the design is perfectly fine. It's just the size, really. I'm just stumbling everywhere, guys. I'm so sorry. Like I said, it has a headphone jack. It does have Touch ID 1, which is, again, it's not that big of a deal. The sad thing is this phone has no water resistance to it. I think it does have a little bit of water resistance, kind of like what they did with the 6S. They didn't really market it as being water resistant. So I think if you get some water on it, you'll be fine, but I wouldn't test it. I still think it's okay. Another sad thing is that this phone actually does not have any force touch. So if you're 3D touching or whatever, this phone does not have that, which is super weird. I feel like they could have added it. Same thing with the iPhone XR, but they didn't. So that's kind of a shame. But again, I think you can get away with it. And I'm not going to bash on Apple too much here just because this was kind of the more budget phone and Force Touch was literally just introduced. So, I could keep that same energy and put it here, but I do have to kind of factor in some things. So I do think it's not that big of a deal. Another slight thing is actually that this phone came in a couple different storage variants, and I love mentioning this just because if you don't want to spend that much money, you can get a 16 gigabyte iPhone SE, and if your storage limits are low, you can get a very good deal on it. You could probably go in for like $80, $90 in the used market, or you can even go up to 128 gigabytes. So whether you want a small amount or a large amount, you have that option, so it's super cool. And ultimately, I mean, you probably already know my answer, but is the iPhone SE worth it in 2018, in the later part of 2018? I will say yes, 100%. This phone is completely worth it. There's really not too much that's wrong with it. I really don't know too many hardware problems or anything. I actually ran an analysis not too long ago about which iPhones had the most problems, and the iPhone SE was, I think, the lowest. Like, nobody really complained about it. It's a very safe phone. You're not going to have too many, things wrong with it. It's a good size. It's a very good price. You're getting pretty decent battery life. You're still being supported for another couple of years, I would say. Probably you're getting all of iOS 12, and you're going to get iOS 13, and potentially you could get iOS 14. I don't know yet. I'll see more of that next year once I do another updated review, but I still think this phone is still very much worth it just because of the price, the screen, the size, the battery, and the performance. So there's really not too much you can go wrong here, guys. And of course, if you guys want to pick up an iPhone SE, I'll leave a link in the description where you can find one for the lowest price. Definitely consider getting it through that link because not only do you find it for the lowest price, but you also help the channel out and it helps make more of these videos and improve the quality and all that stuff. So it would mean so much if you guys could go and get it through that link or get anything through that link actually. Because I do get commission off that. So if you guys want to be awesome, do that. If you guys have any questions or anything, leave it down in the comment section below. Hit that like button, but definitely hit that subscribe button. Every single subscriber we get really does count, so it'll mean so much if you guys could hit that. Also, check out the other links down in the description as well. My Twitter, my Instagram, all that stuff is down there. Make sure you check it out. Also, check out my second channel, which is also linked down there. I'm literally like 20 subscribers away from 1,000, so if you guys could go and subscribe to that channel as well. I do a lot more iOS reviews, and I talk a lot more about the iPhone SE on that channel as well, or at least I'm going to start once I hit 1,000, so definitely check that channel out too. But more importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out, Salon.